Welcome to tonight's Ascension Incubator. We'll start with an opening prayer. Dear God, we sit today to bathe in your cathedral of light. May the spark of you ignite another layer of insight within me, that I might see the higher order of this journey that I have chosen, that I might hear the universal song of oneness. And that I might feel the resonance of infinite love. May this open the weathered door of my life lessons and renew my faith to walk in your footsteps of kindness, compassion, understanding for all beings. I ask that you please remove my masks of fear that govern my reactions and hang them on the wall next to judgment and ego. Please lift this burden that I might carry upon my shoulders and release me from the story I read every day that serves to define me. Gift me this day with a blank page, so that I might explore new colours with a childlike wonder, to arrive in the playground of being, and to realise it's not about getting anywhere, but rather being here, now. For that is the journey that I am here for, and not the destination that I strive for. May you be my bridge from fear to love, and hold me in your foundations of light. May we all be blessed and protected forever in your name, for now and always. Amen. I thought it was fitting to start today's session with a prayer because that is what we're going to be talking about today is prayer and meditation. What's the difference? How does it work? Is there a difference between the two? And what do they all mean? And how do you do one versus the other? So these are going to be... This is an interesting topic. In fact, I actually got asked this yesterday, so I thought it was quite fitting for tonight's topic. I hope you are all enjoying your Friday evening, and as we begin on the topic of prayer versus meditation, is there a difference? There is indeed a difference. There's a large difference. Prayer is basically like the conscious act of directing energy. Meditation is basically being open to what comes in. Sri Chinmoy actually, he was made quite famous about demonstrating the power of mind over matter, and he would be able to, in his more mature years, shall we say, he was able to lift weights heavier than people half of his age. He was quite a leader in his world, and some people may have seen him or heard of him and his teachings. And in one of his books called, I think it was called The Wings of Joy, and he spoke about the difference between prayer and meditation. And he stated that prayer was, and some of us might have heard this before, but prayer is speaking to, it's talking, it's directing, whereas meditation is listening. and being open to what actually comes in. And what happens is that speaks in silence, and then it manifests through your intuition. So as we sit in silence in the prayer and the meditation, as we sit within that space of meditation, we're open to what we can receive. And sometimes the question is, what do I do? Do I do one? Do I do both? I tend to do both. It's called contemplative prayer. I mean, even in the Bible, not that, this is a religious teaching in any way, but I like to look at the history of all different teachings, because I think all sacred texts from Taoism to Buddhism to Christianity to, all of these different teachings interweaved through all of them, they all have certain likenesses, they join, they have similar teachings. So I will refer to different aspects of different what I would call sacred texts, but it's not constituted by the let's just say the indoctrinated belief systems. So it's more looking at it at a broader state, at a broader picture. So in the Bible it mentions that it mentions meditation or to meditate 23 times and 19 times in the book of Psalms alone. When the Bible mentions meditation, it often mentions obedience in the next breath. So, for example, there's a reference in the book of Joshua which says, "The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night." And then when you look at, for example, St. Teresa of Avila, who was a doctor of the church from 1515 to 1582, and she practiced what was called contemplative prayer in periods of 1 hour at a time. She'd do it twice a day, and she believed that no one was faithful to the practice of meditation could possibly. So anyone who was faithful to the practice of meditation could possibly lose their soul. Her particular writings itself are fundamental teachings in Christian spirituality. And then you look at Taoism. Now, Taoism in meditation refers to traditional meditative practices associated with the Chinese philosophy, the religion of Taoism. And this is the concept, if you like, of concentration, mindfulness, contemplation, visualization. The earliest Chinese references actually, they reference it to the meditation date from the Warring States period, which was between 475 to 21 BCE. So, there's some interesting, interrelated systems of meditation versus prayer. And I thought a really interesting story to share with you would be one that I heard shared by actually Carolyn Myss. And she had done this workshop, it was a really full day workshop. I think it went for a really, really long time. She was exhausted and she just wanted to get home. Didn't really want to engage further with anybody else and wanted to head home. So she was sharing the story of this, just about to leave, and this one of the organisers of the event said, no, I'll take you, it's on my way, I'll drop you off. And she sort of reluctantly said okay, because she really wanted to just be in her own space. And she said, I was grateful that I actually did this, because it was one of the car rides of her life that completely changed her life. And it talks about, this particular story is about the power of prayer and this woman's personal experience with it. And and this is, and I share this whether you believe in whatever you want to call it, God. I refer to it as God or spirit or source. All roads lead to one. It's all the same stuff. We just give it a different label, and we ultimately it's source. Source energy, source. It's the life giver, and so she spoke about her experience in the car on the way back to the hotel where she was dropping her off. And she said to her, I was in a really full-on terrible car accident many years ago. And in this car accident, I actually died. And I had the car accident occurred. I died, and I was floating, and I remember this vividly, and I was actually floating out of my body. And we hear a lot about people having out-of-body experiences. I've had one, or two, or a few. And, and she floated out of her body, and she was able to watch and witness what was going on in the scene, the crash scene, while she was, watching her body laying there on the ground. And there was all these people, rushing to her aid. And next thing she said was that she saw about 2 or 3 cars back this big channel of light just coming up and going towards where the scene was. And she was trying to think, what is that? Where's that light coming from? And she saw that, and it was like this light was moving it was kind of coming out of this car and to her crash scene. And so she made a note, and this is just fascinating that all this happened for her during it, and she remembered it. She made a note of the car that was 2 to 3, cars back. And she actually took note of the license plate number. And as she did this, she remembered it. And then at this point she was given the aspect of, the choice. Do you want to go back to your body, or do you want to head off into the white city, so to speak? And anyway, so she decided to get back in her body and as well remembered the number plate that she had seen in this car. And after that, she came back into the body, she recovered, and it wasn't long after that she still kept thinking about this vision or this situation that she had and this, experience. And she remembered the number plate, and she managed to, through certain means, track down who was the owner of that car. She bought a bunch of flowers, went to the person's house and thanked them, because she explained that she was the car that was in the accident a little while back. And do you remember, blah, blah. They started conversing. Yes, I was a few cars back. And she asked the person, what were you doing at the time? Because I saw this incredible light coming out of your car and towards me. And I always get goosebumps when I tell this story. And she said to her that I was praying for you. So it was just such a powerful story, in the sense that she was able to physically remember and see the manifestation of prayer. And then it's such a beautiful thing. It's such a powerful thing that, because we can't see it, we underestimate it. We don't really take it on as, we don't know whether it's doing anything. And this was a really great example of that intention, that clear intention of prayer. And I thought it was just a really beautiful story to share, and it really made, really sort of brought it home as to, the power of this, the power of prayer. And then if we move on to, so that's sort of, the mystical experience, if you like, the mystical experience of prayer. Well, let's have a little look at the scientific side of it as well, because I like the balance of the two. And so Greg Braden is a wonderful leading edge author, scientist. He's he works in the space of quantum science and quantum mechanics and all of that, and quantum healing and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, so he shares a story about his experience with a more of an explanation of prayer first, and then we'll go into sort of the science. And he had a friend who was a Native American Indian, and actually asked if he would like to join him in sharing a prayer of rain before they went to go and do something else. And so he said, yeah, I'd love to come along and have a look. And so he will take part in the prayer, because he was naturally curious. And so anyway, this was in a place that was that's a stone circle, and each stone was placed by hand by their ancestors. And so there was a lot of history. It was a very sort of hidden sort of area where they go to pray, and they go to pray for rain. And anyway, so he went through the process of his prayer. He honoured the 4 directions, held his hands in prayer, and within a very short period of time, he turned around to Greg, and he goes, you hungry? Should we go eat? And he was just like, oh, okay. I thought we were doing a prayer for rain. He goes, yeah, we're done. So, and he said, he said, no, we're not praying for rain. And he goes, because if we pray for rain, it won't happen. Because when you pray for something, it's acknowledging that something is not there. Interesting perception, isn't it? So when you pray for something, it's acknowledging that it's not there. So he sort of sat with that for a bit, and he was just like, okay, this is an interesting concept. I get it. I understand it at an intellectual level, but what does he mean? Like, it was so he was just like, what? Well, if you didn't pray for rain, what did you pray for then? And he said, well, when I closed my eyes, I began to feel the feeling of how it felt to have rain fall on me, the smell of rain, the feeling of mud on my feet. So instead of him praying for the rain, he closed his eyes and felt that it had already arrived. And he said, and by doing that, it opened up the door of possibility for rain to appear, which I thought was a really beautiful perception on, when we pray versus when we meditate. And it was a really gorgeous approach to understanding the concept of that and how we might apply that in our own lives. And then later in that afternoon, the rain actually appeared, and he asked his friend, what happened? And his friend said, well, I haven't really figured out that part of the prayer yet. And I think that's the mystery of it. It's the mystery of we put it out there into the universe, and we put it out there into the ether. And I feel like in some ways we can have a part. It's ultimately up to the universal law as to what is and isn't to occur, but we can put our order in. For instance, we can at least ask, and we can at least put that visual, put that intention into the ether for it to be considered in the dynamic of what is meant to be. So sometimes what I do is when I do either say prayers for someone or I do meditate for someone, I allow a sense of disconnection, that it will be what it will be, but I will always put that intention in the hope that perhaps the wonderful source energy is going to hear my prayer and going to answer my prayers. And often our prayers don't get typically answered the way that we would like in our minds, the way we think. And that's the other thing, is, are we praying with an agenda? Are we asking for something with an agenda? Is there an agenda attached? And when you often do it with no agenda is often when, the floodgates open. And so that might be something that, you can consider in your approach to whether we do prayer or meditation. And I like to call it more contemplative. So contemplative prayer, contemplative meditation, where you have the space between it. So you engage and you talk, and then you have a space, and that's sort of where you can have the listening and you can tune into that. But when we look at the power of it, so why is it something that is, it is a bit of a mystery, but it has actually been measured in the world of science. And so in 1972, they did an experiment with 24 US cities, and they documented it in the well-known TN studies. And so basically during this time, what they got these people to do in the 24 US cities was to feel the feelings of peace. And so again, if you liken that to the story that Greg was saying about Greg Braddon was saying about the Native American Indian who wasn't praying for rain, but was just feeling the rain on his face, and, that it had already arrived. They did the same concept with this, and what they found was that when they were feeling these feelings of peace, they were able to measure, statistically measure, the reductions in crime, traffic accidents declined. Even in Chicago, the stock markets went up in the period of time that they had those feelings of peace. And what they did was they did it time and time again to make sure it wasn't just a coincidence, and it wasn't just to make sure that effectively this particular effect could be measured and applied. And what happened was it was measured and it was applied to a greater experiment, which they called the International Peace Project in the Middle East. And it was in the Journal of a Journal of Conflict Resolution, 1988. And they were trained to feel peace, and it was in Israel and Lebanon. And so during this, what they call the prayer window, they found that the terrorist activities dropped to zero, that emergency hospital visits declined, and what they did again was they did it in different times, in different places, to ensure that it wasn't a coincidence. Now, I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty freaking amazing. The fact that we have that measurable data to say that this is really powerful stuff. But the key was that they knew that it took a certain number of people to feel the feelings of peace. And they did this experiment so many times that they were able to define what was the number, the threshold number, which I found really fascinating, for the effects to actually be carried in the community and beyond. And so basically it came down to a precise number and a precise number of people, and so they did it in a formula. So it was effectively the square root of 1% of the population was the threshold number. So if you, for example, had 1 million people in your population, well, you would get the square root of that, and the number ends up being about 100 people. It's not much. With 6 billion people, it ends up being 8,000 people. And this was all, linked to these studies that they did as the threshold number for people to be at the same time simultaneously feeling the feelings of peace, the impact that it would have. Pretty crazy, hey? So I don't know if any of you have had experiences with the power of prayer or meditation in any way, shape or form, but I have had many experiences where I have, and then things occur and you're like, did I do that? Was that me, or was that just, did that just happen? But when you sort of start to see the power of this and the power of the intention of our prayer, it can be really incredible. It can be such an incredible thing, and something that I think we have to, in some instances, we have to surrender the part that we don't know, the mystical part of it, and that's the part that makes it so magical. And in some ways it is mystical, in some ways it's not. I mean, you've got these clear studies that indicate the impact and how these people had felt peace at the same time, and a certain amount of people at certain cities around the world, and it was documented in the Journal of Conflict Resolution in 1988. 1988, like they were talking about that in 1988. I was 8 years old then. So it's like, yeah, it's pretty cool to think about that. So one of the things I thought might be useful for us is looking at the particular prayer. So it's a feeling-based prayer. And again, the reference to prayer isn't a religious reference. It's just a reference to prayer. So whatever your belief system is, apply it to that. So basically this is called the feelings-based prayer, and I this was from the Greg Braden interview, and I found it really interesting. So I thought it might be something that might be just a bit useful for us. So what we do is the first step is we witness all events, those of environmental balance and those that we see as the absence of this balance as possibilities. So we witness all these events, whatever it is, particular events that are happening, like, for example, COVID, for example, the riots, whatever it might be that's happening in the world right now, we can witness that in our mind's eye. And we do so without judgment, right, wrong, bad, good. We do it without a label. What we then do is we release our judgment of the situation by blessing those conditions that have caused us pain. Now, the blessing does not condone or consent to the event or the condition. Rather, it acknowledges the event is part of the single source of all that is. And if you want to refer more to it, there is a book called Walking Between the Worlds, The Science of Compassion, So you can look that up if you want to go deeper into that. And then the next bit from there is we've released our judgment to the situation. We've placed a blessing on the condition that might have caused us pain. And then now what we do is we feel the feelings of our prayer as already been answered. And in doing this, what happens is we invoke the ancient quantum principle, stating that conditions within our bodies are mirrored in the world beyond, which is pretty cool. Then the next step is we acknowledge the power of our prayer, and we know or feel that the focus of our prayer has already come to pass. So again, you could liken it to, it's not necessarily the same as law of attraction, but there are elements of it. It's probably at another level, I'd say. So the next step from there is our prayer now consists of acknowledging that balance is already present in our world, living from the knowledge that this balance exists, and empowering our prayer by giving thanks for this opportunity to choose. So it's a really beautiful, and what I can do is share that with you so you can refer back to it. Because I don't know if I can do it in here, but I'll try. Just see if I can copy and paste it across for you and see if this works. And in that way you can refer to it. There you go. Hopefully that worked. I'm doing it from a different software, so kind of looks like it's worked, I think. Yeah, okay. So try that. Have a look at that and see if that's something that resonates for you. Again, with all this kind of information, it's really a case of whether these things actually resonate for you or not. There is no right, there's no wrong, there's no right way to do things, no wrong way to do things. It's just what feels good for you. And in the feeling good for you, it's it's your guidance system. I always say that you need to honor your internal GPS, because we get given that and we lose it along the way with the distractions of life, the distractions of fear of being hurt, so we don't act out in certain ways, or we don't love fully, or we don't open our hearts fully, open our minds fully, because there's fear associated with it from past experiences. So, when we start to lose that and kind of get those little tarnishes, if you like, on the soul, we begin to disconnect from the essence of our internal GPS, our internal guidance system. And so that's why I say with any kind of teachings and anything that you hear, take it as it is, not as gospel. Always the mark of an educated mind is to entertain a thought without necessarily accepting it, which is Aristotle's saying. And I do love referring to that one because I think that it's a really good thing to be able to keep that broadness of listening and tuning into all of those things, and then just allowing ourselves to perhaps entertain the thought. And then we can decide when we tune into our internal GPS system whether we choose to accept that thought. And the same goes, and so that applies. So how do we begin to fine tune that in many ways in our practices? So if you are doing a daily meditation practice, or if you haven't even started and you're not really sure how to meditate, anything like that, then it's just starting. Instead of one day, make it day one, and it's starting the process. And some days you might do it and some days you might not, but really the essence of it is sitting in that silence, sitting in that silent bubble and listening. And it may just be listening to the silence and seeing what you hear. For instance, now when you listen to the silence, what do you hear? It's in that listening, and that's the key when we are meditating or when we are praying. It's in the listening. It's almost that anticipation of what it is we're going to hear. And as we sit in that, our body and our composition in the body begins to adjust. Our brainwave state begins to drop, and we go into that delta theta potentially state, depending on how long we hold it there for. And it's in this state that we experience that decrease in cortisol, a decrease in the stress hormone. And we begin to also, at a mystical level, open ourselves up to here. And so a bit of an example for you is that, I would start my day with, and sometimes I don't, sometimes I get busy and I just don't do it, but, start the day with a bit of a gratitude prayer. Anybody that sort of comes to mind that I want to pray for. I ask for always blessings on the planet to support our Mother Nature in her holding of us crazy humans. And I, intuitively just go with what feels right at that time. And then I sit in a space of silence and I allow myself to be quiet in my mind. And it's also allowing yourself to kind of, watch those thoughts go past. Sometimes they drift past, sometimes they keep popping up. And it's not about holding it. It's not about like, I've got to hold that no thought space. Because then you're in the energy of trying and you're not really there. You're not being present in that space. And so the best approach or the best example of this is it's not about trying to hold that. It's about bringing yourself back. How often do you have to bring yourself back? And eventually, as you do it more and more, you don't have to bring yourself back as much. And that's the art. It's not necessarily the art of sitting in that and holding that space of silence and of a space of just quietness without too many thoughts drifting in and out. It's about how quickly can you bring yourself back. Good example that I was given was you imagine you're sitting on a riverbank and you're looking across the river and there's a tree, and your task is to focus on the tree across from you. And you're looking at the tree, and then all of a sudden a log floats past, or a bird floats past, or whatever floats past, a duck. And you're kind of watching the tree, and then you kind of go, oh, look, there's a duck. And you kind of look at the duck, oh, he's so cute. And he's drifting past, and then you're wondering a little bit about his life or whatever might come up. And then next thing you go, okay, oh, no, hang on, back to the tree, focus on the tree. And then again, maybe, I don't know, a dolphin swims past, and you're like, oh, I love dolphins. So I'm going to look at the dolphin, and then you start looking at the dolphin, and then you drift off and watching the dolphin. You start thinking about, dolphins, and you think about this, and you think about what they're eating, and you maybe think about who they're hanging out with, or what kind of conversations do they have, what do they think about? And then the next thing you know is you're drifted off down the river with the dolphin, and then you're like, oh no, wait, I've got to come back. And you come back to the tree, focus on the tree, I'm focusing on the tree. And as you're focusing on the tree, you're like, okay, great, I'm back on the tree. Excellent. And you're sitting there focusing on the tree. And then a boat comes past. And then you're like, oh man, the boat's too big. I've got to look at the boat. And the boat goes past. And you're like, oh, look at that boat. And then the next thing happens again. And then off you are back down the river. This is meditation. This is what happens in all of our minds at from times to time. And what happens is we get better and better at staring at the tree, as opposed to watching the distractions of our thoughts go past us. And we have the ability to stare at the tree, and even if we have something as big as a boat come past the tree and block our vision of the tree, we're still able to hold that focus as it goes past. And that's the art. It's not about how long you can hold it, that focus for. It's about how quickly can you catch yourself and bring yourself back. Because the more you do that, you're repatterning the brainwave state, you're repatterning the neural pathways in the brain to be able to come back and arrive back. And it's almost like Joe Dispenza describes it beautifully. He says, consider your mind like a naughty dog. And you pretty much got to sit there and say, stay. And it's like, yeah, that's what it's like. You gotta like, come on, stay. And so it's that bringing yourself back. And the art of doing that as well is not beating yourself up when you bring yourself back. How many of us have done that when you're in a state of meditation and you kind of drift off and then you come back and you're like, oh man, I'm not doing this right. Oh geez, no, stop talking, stop it. And you just end up having this whole conversation in your head of beating yourself up for not focusing enough in the meditation. And then we end up, in a big old ball of mess, and we just give up on it and walk away. It happens. This is part of it. This is part of the journey of it, okay? So I invite you this week, as part of the teaching from this, to perhaps use that visual of the tree and your thoughts floating past you. And if you do float off into, when you're in the space of silence and you do float off into a thought or into a memory, that you bring yourself back and you actually, instead of punishing yourself for drifting off, you think, oh great, good work, I've brought myself back to focus. So you change the perception of that, and working on that and seeing how often it takes you, how many times you drift off and come back, drift off, and it might be heaps and heaps and heaps of times. So if that's the case, it's okay, because what will happen is the more you do it, the less it'll happen, right? The brain's muscle in many respects, and so what we're doing is we're teaching, we're redefining. It's repatterning the brain waves, really, not a muscle, but repatterning the brain waves in the neural pathways and these synaptic connections that occur in the brain that have formed their own thought habit, where the body has become the memory of that habit and it becomes a redundant habit, and then you run on autopilot. So that's the bit where we want to interrupt, which is the old way of thinking, the old pattern thoughts, the old way of that we just can't seem to sit still in silence for long enough. So try that, because the more you interrupt it, the more the easier it becomes. And I feel like that would be something that could support you on your journey of prayer and meditation. Hey Polly, how are you? Nice to see you. And so in that journey of prayer and meditation, just understand that it might just be mixing things up a bit. So if you do a morning routine or even an evening routine in your meditation, try doing the mixture of the two. So a prayer and then a meditation. Now, some people get a little bit scared of prayer because they think, it's a bit, it has religious connotations. If they don't have religious beliefs, it's not about that. It's nothing to do with that. Okay, everybody. It's about having that conversation with Source, with God, whatever you want to call it. So release the labels, release the old teachings, if you like, of what works for you and what doesn't work for you and your belief systems, and open up to. And if you can't do that, if you find it difficult, a really good one to find on, I think it's on iTunes, is Marianne Williamson's prayer of courage, and it's a beautiful prayer. And so sometimes I use that when I'm struggling to kind of think about, when I can't really be bothered thinking out my own prayer. When I get to that point sometimes, and I'm just like, and sometimes I'll just sit in silence and I won't have a prayer or any agenda. I'll just sit with Spirit. I'll just sit with Source and be in that space. So you can attempt that in the sense of, if you're not sure, then Google or look up on iTunes or Spotify. It's the Marianne Williamson Prayer of Courage, and it's a beautiful one to follow to get you started. And it kind of gives you that essence. And so for me, I kind of follow a part of that, and then I do a little bit of my own. And it's sort of, saying to again, God, Spirit, whatever you want to call it, God is what I refer to it as. Please use me as a channel of your peace today. Please guide me in where it is you would want me to be. Show me who it is you would like, who it is I am to be, where it is I am to go, and with whom it is I am to speak. And I, surrender my being to you to be in service to the human family and to our planet, something along those lines, So that's sort of how I suppose word it in some ways. And I say, please wrap me in your light and love and peace, and surround me and keep me safe as I walk forever in your name. Amen. And so something like that, and again, you can find your own, whatever it is that works for you. You don't even have to say, dear God, you can just start talking. And you can have different types of, endings of the prayer. It doesn't have to be amen. It can be like aho or thanks, or sometimes I'm just like, what's going on? Carolyn Miss says it great. She's like, sometimes she has situations and she doesn't even bother. She just looks up and goes, fix it. I'm going to bed, fix it. So, it's just, it depends on whatever your relationship might be. Explore that. And then once you've done that in the morning part or in the first section, then in the second section, sit in that silence and be quiet in that sound. And again, it doesn't have to be, an hour-long meditation or anything like that. You can, if you're busy and you've got kids and things and life is in the way, sometimes it's about how do we make time, of course, but often, it can be as short as like a 15-minute segment in just enough to still and to connect in, and to be that energy source and ask to be that channel of peace and to be guided. Some days I just go, well, where do you want me to be today? And then I just tune in and I'm like, okay, this is where I'm going. And then off I go and do my thing. And so it's just finding that and see if that works for you. See how that goes as part of your practice. If you have one, and if you don't have one, then give it a go. Just have a play around with it. There's no rule book. There's no right way, wrong way to do it. Just feel into it, and you can follow some of the options that I've given you tonight. So in saying that, as we finish off tonight, I thought what would be beautiful is, of course, to finish on a prayer, and then I will play one of my 432 Hertz songs. Tonight it will be on the keys, which you can't really see if you're watching. So as I clunk around and get myself comfortable, for those of you who haven't heard my work before and all these beautiful instruments around me, I play them all. I wouldn't say I'm a master at all of them, but I certainly love them all, and they all. I connect with all of them and each of them. And I do offer this work if you're local in Perth. I do it live, and it's much more deeper. And we do a beautiful, beautiful deep 1 hour or more journey with the 432 Hertz frequency. And so when we listen to typical music, even my keyboard is tuned to 432 as well. So when you're listening to what seems like maybe just a really nice song, it's also in 432, so it's also working at a different level. And often people listen to this work with their eyes closed because it takes you into another space. And it's probably not going to do a huge amount for you with one song, but it still does move people in for me in mysterious ways. It's always something different, and so I'll be sharing with you a piece that is called Love and Duo. And actually, when I recorded this, because I'm getting the album, it's a 1.5 year work of progress, and it's part of a wider project which I will be announcing soon, where we will be doing it with a full orchestra and emerging a crossover of genres. So we're going to have a really beautiful experience, and I'll also be having there's a documentary that's been filmed along with it, and also we'll be getting neuroscientists coming in to actually do some QEEGs on which is the brain scanning, on seeing what happens to our brains, certain people's brains, when we are doing this work. And it'll be a 1 hour, probably 1 hour 10-minute journey, so please do continue to watch this space, because I'll be announcing it when the time is right. But it has literally been a 1.5 years of work. But this particular piece I recorded, and each of them we've had to translate and work with a composer, the wonderful, talented Dr. Stuart James, and working with the composition and working in the incredible Soundfield Studios with Cliff as well. And those are beautiful team of people, and to make this bigger project really come to life. But it was quite complex in the sense that Stuart, as I recorded this music, we had to translate it and compose it for an orchestra that is typically tuned to 440 hertz or 442. So, you know, it's going to be a first in some respects. It's going to be a different project, that's for sure. I'll be telling you more about it as time goes on. But the long version of that was I was working in the studio with this particular song, and halfway through I burst into tears. And this happens sometimes because I'm working with 432. It works on me as well, and the power of this is that it evokes emotion. It can also move blockages in the body energetically. I've had so many people have physical ailments shift, and you know, I'm not going to say that it heals, because I think that it's different for every single person. So it will do for you whatever is meant to happen. It's not to do with me or how I, you know, maneuver it. I am merely the vehicle. So in saying that, this piece is called Love and Duo, and I actually wrote this for my darling love, January, and it was a beautiful piece I wrote a while ago. But so it's a bit of a love song, a heart song, and so as we close out tonight, I invite you to listen to this with your eyes closed, so you can really tune in to that tone and that frequency. And I have put in the message section if you want to join us at the live concerts, the live events, then you can come along to those, and they're in Cottesloe. July's booked out. August is getting booked up, so get your tickets if you are wanting to join us. And if you're not in Perth, that's okay. There's also a link there for an online version of this where it is studio quality recordings, and you can actually take your own journey at home for an hour. So I've replicated it in some ways, and you get a beautiful self-care workbook that aligns with it. So if that resonates for you, then go for it. And see what flows. And so before we finish, I will first of all close. Which way am I going to do this? I think what I'll do is I'll do the song, and then I'll close with the prayer. And then I'll say good night or good morning, wherever you're watching from. Okay, so please do enjoy, and you are welcome to close your eyes if you wish. I opened my eyes and saw you for the first time. You shine so bright, I couldn't believe you were mine. For when I see you smile, my heart skips into the sky. Let's down the road to carry me to your heights. And then it all made sense. The dots, they joined up into the line. You built a fence just to make it easy to find whenever I'm lost. On the other side of time, doesn't matter the cost. always be greener on this side. How do I, oh, 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 how do I, oh, 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 how do I, oh, oh, undeniably, I knew I would stick around, for in this journey is beyond what I thought I'd found, and I wasn't meant to love you, but you know I do. It's like I can walk now, 'cause you fit the other shoe. And so here we are, creating a new beginning with nowhere to start, healing us and forgiving our ancestors. They see as our plan evolves, that by setting ourselves free, world problems can dissolve. How do I, oh, 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 how do I, oh, 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 how do I, oh, 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 shut up. Tonight I sit here to bathe in your cathedral of light, where your infinite being can radiate through every cell in my body. May this essence of light transform my thoughts from fear to love, from anxiety to calm, from sadness to courage. Tonight I pray that you hear me deeply, for the daily whispers in my mind keep me chained to this current reality. So these burdens I carry now, I place them in your hands. May they be elevated into the essence of universal law and remind my mind that the problem is already solved. As I rest upon my pillow tonight, may you elevate my soul into the wings of your angels. May you gift me with the knowing that I am always held. May you heal every cell in my body and radiate your oneness into my heart, so that when I awake in the morning, this light radiates out and touches every being, every thought, and every action. May I evolve during this period and realize that it is on the edge of chaos that brilliance happens. If I forget this and get pulled back into my humanness, remind me to ask in these times, how would my soul feel about this right now? For when I connect with that part of my soul that is you, I realize there is nothing but love. For I long to be closer to this every day, in every moment. And in these moments may I find the magnificent in the mundane, to see the natural laws that flow around me, and to arrive back to this knowing that everything is temporary. The only constant is the relationship with my soul and the oneness that is you. Please wrap me in your light and in your love and in your peace. Surround us and keep us safe as we walk in your name. Amen. And as we bring ourselves back, thank you all for engaging and being a part of this beautiful series as the Ascension Incubator series. I look forward to sharing more topics with you. Friday evening, 7:30. And I do hope that you all have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you so much for the beautiful comments. Much love and much peace. Let me know how you go with that meditation/prayer practice. Have a beautiful night, everyone. Take care.